The rifle cracked through the morning air as Celestin Hawthorne pulled the trigger, dropping the rattlesnake mere inches from her wheelchair. Her weathered hands never trembled any more, not since the fever took her husband and left her legs useless as winter kindling. "Get away from there, you fool woman!" hollered Josiah Brennan from his porch across the dusty street of Willowbrook. "That snake's got friends." Celestin wheeled herself closer to examine her kill, ignoring the town busybody. At 32, she'd been a widow for 3 years, paralyzed for 2, and unwanted by every soul in this godforsaken Texas settlement for longer than she cared to count. The wooden wheels of her chair, crafted by her late husband's skilled hands, rolled smoothly over the packed earth as she maneuvered around the dead serpent. The sound of hoofbeats thundered down Main Street, sending chickens squawking and children scurrying. 3 Comanche warriors rode hard into town, their horses lathered with sweat and foam. The lead rider, tall, broad-shouldered, with obsidian hair flowing past his shoulders, brought his mount to a skidding halt directly in front of Celestin's modest cabin. Women screamed and men reached for their weapons, but the warrior raised his hand in a gesture of peace. His dark eyes, sharp as flint, surveyed the scene and landed on Celestin, who sat perfectly still in her chair, rifle still smoking in her grip. "I am Nalnish," he announced in accented English, his voice carrying the authority of thunder. "We seek the one called Medicine Woman." Josiah stepped forward, puffing his chest like a bantam rooster. "Ain't no medicine woman here, savage. Best you move along before you lie." Nalnish's gaze never left Celestin. The Apaches speak of a white woman who heals with plants, who sits in the rolling chair. They say she saved their war chief's son from the spotted sickness. Celestin's heart hammered against her ribs. She had indeed treated the young Apache brave last winter, using willow bark tea and poultices made from plants her grandmother had taught her about. But she'd thought that act of mercy had remained secret. "That's her," squeaked Widow Perkins, pointing a gnarled finger at Celestin. "She's the one been helping them heathen Indians. I seen her gathering them strange herbs." The crowd's murmur turned ugly. These people who'd shunned her, who'd whispered behind their hands about the crippled woman being a burden on the community, now saw a chance to rid themselves of her entirely. "She ain't welcome here no more," shouted the blacksmith. "Send her packing with her Indian friends." Nalnish dismounted with fluid grace and approached Celestin's chair. Up close, she could see the geometric tattoos marking his chest beneath his buckskin vest, the eagle feather braided into his hair, the knife scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. "My sister lies dying," he said quietly, his voice meant for her ears alone. "The white man's sickness burns through her blood. Our medicine man says only the woman who sits with the spirit of healing can save her." Celestin met his unwavering stare. In his obsidian eyes, she saw no pity, no disgust, only respect and desperate hope. It was the first time in years anyone had looked at her as something other than a burden. "I'll come," she said simply. The journey to the Comanche camp took 2 days, with Celestin's wheelchair strapped to a travois pulled by one of the warriors' horses. Nalnish rode beside her, his presence both intimidating and oddly comforting. Unlike the men of Willowbrook, he didn't avert his eyes from her useless legs, or speak to her in the patronizing tone reserved for children and invalids. "Tell me about your sister," Celestin said as they crested a hill overlooking a valley dotted with buffalo hide teepees. "Ayanna," Nalnish replied, his voice heavy with grief. "She has seen 23 summers. The fever came after she helped birth her friend's child. The mother had been near white settlers' wagons." Celestin nodded grimly. "Cholera most likely, or typhoid. Both were death sentences without proper treatment, and even with it, the odds were poured out as they descended into the camp. Curious faces emerged from teepees. Children pointed at her wheelchair, chattering in rapid Comanche. Elderly women nodded respectfully, while warriors studied her with calculating eyes. Nalnish spoke sharply to anyone who stared too long, his tone protective. They stopped before a large teepee decorated with painted buffalo and eagles. Nalnish helped her from the travois into her wheelchair, his hands gentle but firm. "She is inside," he said. "But know this, if she dies, some of my people will blame you." "They do not. Trust white medicine." "I understand," Celestin said, rolling toward the teepee entrance. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of sickness. A young woman lay on buffalo robes, her beautiful face gaunt and gray, her breathing shallow. Sweat beaded her forehead. Despite the cool morning air, an elderly medicine man sat beside her, chanting softly while shaking a rattle made from gourds. Celestin approached carefully, not wanting to offend the holy man. She'd learned respect for different healing traditions from her grandmother, a woman who traded knowledge with Cherokee healers before the removals. The medicine man looked up, his weathered face grave. He spoke in Comanche to Nalnish, who translated. "He says the spirits whisper that her time grows short. He will welcome your help." Celestin examined Ayanna carefully, noting the telltale signs, the sunken eyes, the rapid pulse, the dry skin. Severe dehydration from fever and flux. She had perhaps hours, not days. "I need clean water, lots of it," she told Nalnish. "And honey if you have it, salt, willow bark. Elderberries if any grow nearby." As Nalnish relayed her requests, women rushed to gather supplies. Celestin began mixing her remedies, her hands steady despite the weight of responsibility. She'd saved the Apache boy, yes, but he'd been stronger, younger. Ayanna was already so close to the spirit world that Celestin could almost see death hovering in the shadows. Hours passed in tense silence. Celestin spooned liquid into Ayanna's mouth drop by drop, bathed her burning skin with cool cloths, and monitored every breath. The medicine man chanted prayers while she worked, their efforts complementing rather than competing. Just as the sun began to set, Ayanna's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at Celestin with confusion, then spoke in a whisper. She asks why. "A white woman sits in the sacred chair," Nalnish translated, his voice tight with emotion. Celestin met the girl's gaze steadily. "Tell her I sit here because I choose to. Tell her that broken things can still have power." When Nalnish translated her words, Ayanna smiled weakly and reached for Celestin's hand. That night, as Ayanna slept peacefully for the first time in days, Nalnish found Celestin sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. "You saved her," he said simply. "We saved her," Celestin corrected. "Your medicine man's prayers were as important as my herbs." Nalnish studied her face in the firelight. "In my vision quest, I was told I would find strength where others saw weakness. I did not understand until today." Celestin remained in the Comanche camp for a week, ensuring Ayanna's full recovery. During that time, she found herself drawn into the rhythm of tribal life in ways that surprised her. Unlike Willowbrook, where her disability made her invisible or pitiable, here she was valued for her knowledge and skills. Women sought her advice on treating their children's ailments. She taught them to make poultices from prairie plants and showed them techniques her grandmother had learned from Cherokee healers decades earlier. The elders listened respectfully when she spoke, and children played games around her wheelchair without fear or mockery. Nalnish proved to be an attentive companion. He carved new wheels for her chair when the wooden ones began to crack, fashioning them from seasoned oak and wrapping them with buffalo hide for smoother travel. He also constructed a clever system of straps and pulleys that allowed her to transfer herself from chair to horse for short rides. "Why do you do this?" Celestin asked one evening as he adjusted the stirrups on a gentle mare. I'm not your responsibility. Nalnish paused in his work, his hand stilling on the leather. When I was 15, a buffalo charged me during a hunt. Its horn pierced my leg, shattered the bone. For 2 moons, I could not walk. The tribe carried me on travois, fed me, cared for me. I thought I was useless, a burden. He looked at her directly, his dark eyes intense. My grandmother told me that a warrior's strength is not only in his legs or his arms, but in his spirit. She said the spirits sometimes break our bodies too. Forge our souls stronger. You understand this. That night, as Ayana sat up and laughed with her friends for the first time since her illness, she called Celestin to her side. Speaking through Nalnish's translation, she said, "You are no longer white woman or Comanche woman. You are medicine woman. The spirits have claimed you." The pronouncement sent a murmur through the gathered tribe. To be claimed by the spirits was a great honor, one rarely bestowed on outsiders, but their peace was shattered the next morning when dust clouds appeared on the horizon. A cavalry patrol rode hard toward the camp, their blue uniforms stark against the golden prairie grass. The soldiers numbered 20, led by a captain whose brass buttons gleamed in the sunlight. Peaceable tribe. Captain Morrison called out, as he reined in his horse, "We're looking for a white woman kidnapped from Willowbrook Settlement. Widow name of Hawthorne." Celestin felt her blood turn cold. Nalnish moved protectively beside her wheelchair, his hand resting on his knife handle. "I wasn't kidnapped," Celestin called out clearly. "I came of my own free will." Morrison's gaze found her, and his expression shifted from professional concern to barely disguised revulsion. "Ma'am, you've obviously been coerced or influenced. These savages have strange ways of bending folk to their will." "These people saved a life and welcomed me as family," Celestin replied firmly, something Willowbrook never did. The captain's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I have orders to bring you back. The good people of your town are concerned for your welfare." Ayana struggled to her feet, still weak but determined. She spoke rapidly in Comanche, her voice growing stronger with each word. The other tribal members nodded agreement, some placing their hands on weapon hilts. "What's she saying?" Morrison demanded. Nalnish stepped forward, his posture radiating controlled danger. "She says the medicine woman is under the protection of the Comanche nation. She says white men who cannot see strength and difference are not worthy to command the wind, much less a warrior's respect." "That's enough," Morrison snapped. "Mrs. Hawthorne, you will mount up now, or I'll have my men assist you." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Warriors emerged from teepees, arrows notched but not yet drawn. Women gathered, their children but stood their ground. The medicine man began a low chant that seemed to make the very earth vibrate with power. Celestin looked around at these faces, brown and weathered, young and old, all united in their willingness to fight for her. Then she looked at Nalnish, whose eyes promised that death itself would not take her against her will. For the first time in 3 years, she felt truly alive. "Captain Morrison," Celestin said, her voice carrying across the tense silence, "appreciate your concern, but I'm exactly where I choose to be." The officer's face flushed red beneath his campaign hat. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're not thinking clearly. These heathens showed me more kindness in 1 week than Willowbrook showed me in 3 years. Celestin cut him off. "Now, unless you have a warrant for my arrest, I suggest you leave. Peacefully." Morrison's hand moved to his saber hilt. "I have authorization to retrieve kidnapped civilians by any means necessary." That's when Nalnish spoke, his English slow and deliberate. "Captain, you have 20 men. We have 200 warriors in this camp and 3 more camps within riding distance. Your choice is simple: leave now or send your family's letters written in blood. The mathematics of the situation weren't lost on Morrison. His eyes darted around the camp, taking in the number of armed warriors now visible among the teepees. Even Ayanna, despite her recent illness, held a war club with steady hands. "This isn't over," Morrison snarled, but he signaled his men to mount up. "Mrs. Hawthorne, when these savages tire of their pet cripple, don't expect any help from civilized folks." The words hit like physical blows, but before Celestin could respond, Nalnish moved. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the captain's horse's bridle and hauled the man down from his saddle. Morrison hit the ground hard, dust exploding around his body. "You will not speak of the medicine woman with such words," Nalnish said, his voice deadly quiet. "She has more strength in her broken body than you have in your entire worthless soul." Morrison scrambled to his feet, his hand on his pistol, but found himself facing 24 arrow points. His own men, recognizing the hopelessness of the situation, made no move to support him. "Mount up," one of his sergeants said urgently. "We're outnumbered 20-1. Morrison climbed back onto his horse, his face black with rage and humiliation. "This isn't finished," he repeated. But the threat sounded hollow now as the cavalry patrol retreated. Kicking up clouds of dust, the entire camp erupted in celebration. Warriors whooped and children laughed, while the women ululated their approval. But Celestin felt only a deep weariness settle over her. "They'll be back," she told Nalnish as the sounds of celebration continued around them. "And they'll bring more soldiers." Nalnish nodded grimly. "I know. But today we showed them that some things cannot be taken by force." That evening, the tribal council convened to discuss the situation. Celestin sat beside the fire, her wheelchair positioned among the elders as if she'd always belonged there. The discussion was lengthy and heated, with various voices arguing for different courses of action. Finally, the war chief, a grizzled veteran named Pacing Wolf, stood to speak. His words, translated by Nalnish, sent a chill through Celestin's heart. "The soldiers will return in greater numbers. They will use the medicine woman as excuse to attack our people. Perhaps it would be better if she returned to her own kind before blood is spilled." Murmurs of agreement rippled through some of the warriors. It was a practical solution: sacrifice one person to save many. Celestin had heard such logic before, when the townspeople of Willowbrook had suggested she'd be better off in an institution where she wouldn't be a burden. But before she could speak, Ayanna rose unsteadily to her feet. Her voice, still weak from illness, somehow carried to every corner of the circle as she spoke in passionate Comanche. When she finished, Nalnish translated with visible emotion. "She says that honor is not measured by convenience. She says that the medicine woman stayed to save a life when she could have remained safe. She says that anyone who would abandon such a person is not worthy to call themselves Comanche." The elderly medicine man spoke next, his words carrying the weight of spiritual authority. "The spirits sent her to us for a purpose. To send her away now would anger the powers that guide our path." One by one, other voices joined the debate. Warriors spoke of courage, women of compassion, elders of wisdom. The discussion continued deep into the night, with the fire burning low and stars wheeling overhead. Finally, Pacing Wolf raised his hand for silence. His decision, when it came, was simple and final. The medicine woman stays. If the white soldiers want war, they will have it. 3 days later, the war drums began echoing across the prairie. Not the celebration drums Celestin had grown to love, but the deep, ominous rhythm that spoke of approaching conflict. Scouts had reported a cavalry column 200 strong moving toward their territory, led by Colonel Harrison Blackwood, a man whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him like the stench of carrion. Nalnish found Celestin by the creek, where she often went to think. She was grinding willow bark into powder, her hands working automatically while her mind wrestled with impossible choices. "You blame yourself," he said, settling beside her wheelchair. "How can I not? All these people willing to fight and die. Because I was too proud to go back to a place that didn't want me." Nalnish was quiet for a long moment, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "When I was young, I caught a hawk with a broken wing. My father told me to kill it, said. Crippled bird was useless, would only suffer. But I kept it, fed it, helped it heal. The wing never flew straight again, but that hawk became the fiercest hunter in our territory. It adapted, found new ways to strike." He turned to look at her directly. "You are that hawk, Celestin. And we are not dying for your pride. We are living for something bigger than fear." That afternoon, the War Council made their final preparations. Warriors painted their faces and blessed their weapons, while women and children prepared to evacuate to caves in the nearby hills. But Celestin had a different plan forming in her mind. "There's another way," she announced during the council meeting. "Let me talk to Blackwood, alone." The suggestion was met with immediate protests. Nalnish looked at her as if she'd suggested riding naked into a tornado. "He's a killer," Pacing Wolf said bluntly. "He would sooner shoot you than listen." "Maybe," Celestin agreed, "but he's also a military man. He understands strategy, costs, benefits. And I have something he wants, a reason to end this without a battle that could spread to other tribes." The debate raged for hours, but eventually Celestin's logic won out. She would meet with Blackwood under a flag of truce with Nalnish as her translator and protector. If negotiations failed, the tribe would be ready for war. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds building on the horizon. Celestin sat in her wheelchair on a low hill between the two forces, watching Blackwood's column approach. The colonel himself rode ahead with a small escort, his uniform immaculate despite days of travel. Blackwood was a tall, lean man with silver hair and cold blue eyes. He dismounted with military precision and studied Celestin with unconcealed contempt. "So you're the cause of all this trouble," he said without preamble. "One crippled woman, bringing shame on the white race by cavorting with savages." "I'm a healer who found a place where my abilities were valued," Celestin replied calmly. "But I'm also a pragmatist, Colonel. You've brought 200 men to capture one woman. That seems like poor resource management." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "I've brought 200 men to teach these heathens that they can't kidnap white women without consequences. I wasn't kidnapped, but let's say, for argument's sake, that you're right. What's your real objective here? To rescue me? To punish the Comanche? Or to justify the military budget by picking a fight?" The colonel's jaw tightened at her blunt assessment. "I have orders to retrieve you and teach these savages a lesson they won't forget. And if I come willingly, what happens to the tribe? They're harboring a kidnapped citizen. Justice demands that you look at the bigger picture," Celestin interrupted. "You attack this camp, you'll have every Comanche band from here to Mexico declaring war. Is one disabled woman worth starting a conflict that could last years and cost thousands of lives?" Blackwood studied her face, perhaps recognizing a sharper intellect than he'd expected. "What are you proposing?" Celestin took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would shape the fate of everyone she'd come to love. "A trade. I'll return to Willowbrook voluntarily, no force required. In exchange, you leave this tribe alone. No punishments, no lessons, no future harassment. They get to live in peace, and you get to report a successful mission without firing a shot. And why would you sacrifice yourself for a bunch of savages?" Before Celestin could answer, Nalnish spoke for the first time. "Because she understands what you do not, Colonel. That strength comes in many forms, and the greatest warriors are those who fight for something larger than themselves. Blackwood looked between them, perhaps beginning to understand the depth of connection he was witnessing. His military mind was clearly calculating odds, costs, political ramifications. "I'll need guarantees," he said finally. "Assurances that there will be no retaliation for this misunderstanding." "You have them," Celestin said quickly. "But I have one condition of my own." "Your condition?" Blackwood's voice dripped with disdain. "You're hardly in a position to make demands." Celestin straightened in her wheelchair, her gray eyes steady as storm clouds. "I want a written guarantee that this tribe will be left in peace. Not just empty promises, a formal treaty signed by your commanding officer. And I want safe passage for any tribal member who needs medical attention to seek help in white settlements." "Absolutely not. I don't negotiate with." "Then you'll have your war," Celestin said simply. "And when the newspapers back east write about the cavalry massacre at Willow Creek, when mothers read about their sons dying because one colonel was too proud to accept a reasonable solution, your career will be over." The threat hit home. Blackwood's political ambitions were well known, and public sentiment was shifting against unnecessary Indian wars. A brutal battle over one woman would indeed make headlines, and not the kind that advanced military careers. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "But you come with me now. No goodbyes, no tearful farewells with your savage friends." Nalnish tensed beside her, his hand moving toward his knife. But Celestin placed a restraining hand on his arm. "I'll come," she said. "But I want 5 minutes to gather my medical supplies. If I'm going back to Willowbrook, I'll need my herbs and tools." Blackwood nodded curtly and signaled his men to wait while she collected her things. As they walked back toward the camp, Nalnish's anguish was palpable. "There has to be another way," he said quietly in English, not wanting the soldiers to understand. "We could fight. We could run. And watch everyone you love die in the process?" Celestin shook her head. "No, this is the right choice. Maybe the only choice." At her teepee, she quickly gathered her precious medical supplies, dried herbs, metal instruments, the worn leather case that held her grandmother's remedies. But hidden among the bottles and pouches, she slipped a small pouch of seeds and a piece of paper with detailed growing instructions written in her careful hand. Ayana appeared at the teepee entrance, tears streaming down her face. She spoke rapidly in Comanche, her words tumbling over each other in desperation. "She says she will never forget," Nalnish translated, his own voice thick with emotion. "She says you gave her life twice, once from sickness, once by showing her that broken things can still heal others." Other tribal members gathered around as word spread of Celestin's departure. Children she had treated, women who had learned from her knowledge, warriors who had come to respect her strength, all stood in silent tribute to the woman who had chosen sacrifice over safety. A medicine man approached with a beaded necklace that gleamed with intricate patterns of blue and silver. As he placed it around her neck, he spoke in Comanche. "He says the spirits will remember your courage," Nalnish translated. "He says wherever you go, you carry the prayers of the people." Finally, Pacing Wolf stepped forward with something wrapped in soft deerskin. When he unfolded it, Celestin gasped. It was a war lance, but modified. Where a typical lance would have an iron point, this one featured an intricate silver medallion engraved with symbols of healing. "A medicine lance," Nalnish explained. "For the warrior who fights with herbs instead of arrows, whose battles are won in sick rooms instead of prairies." As Celestin accepted the honor with shaking hands, Blackwood's impatient voice cut through. "The ceremony. Time's up. Let's move out." The soldiers had prepared a wagon for her, and as they lifted her wheelchair onto the wooden bed, Nalnish caught her hand. "This is not goodbye," he said fiercely. The spirits brought us together for a purpose. That purpose is not finished." "How can you be so certain?" Celestin asked, memorizing every line of his face. "Because in my vision quest, I saw an eagle with silver wings flying over 2 worlds. I know now that eagle was you." His dark eyes burned with certainty, and eagles always return to where they are meant to be. As the wagon rolled away from the camp, Celestin turned for one last look. The entire tribe stood watching her departure, their proud faces etched with sorrow and respect. But it was Nalnish who held her gaze longest, standing straight and tall beside his horse, the wind whipping his long hair like a war banner. The journey back to Willowbrook took 3 days, during which Blackwood maintained a cold professional silence. But Celestin used the time to think, to plan, and to nurture a growing seed of hope that perhaps this sacrifice might bear unexpected fruit. Willowbrook greeted Celestin's return with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disappointment. The townspeople had hoped she would come back broken and grateful, ready to accept charity with proper humility. Instead, she arrived wearing Comanche beadwork and carrying herself with a quiet dignity that made them uncomfortable. "Well, I never," whispered Widow Perkins as the wagon rolled down Main Street. "Look at her, bold as brass and twice as tarnished." Josiah Brennan stepped forward with an oily smile. "Welcome home, Celestin. We've prepared a nice room for you at the boarding house. Very reasonable rates, considering your circumstances." "Thank you, but I'll be staying in my own cabin," Celestin replied calmly. "I assume it's still standing?" "Well, yes, but the town council thought it might be best if you stayed somewhere with more supervision after your ordeal." "I wasn't held prisoner, Josiah. I was a guest." She gestured to the wagon driver. "Please take me home." Her cabin was exactly as she'd left it, though covered in dust and filled with the stale air of abandonment. As she settled back into her familiar surroundings, Celestin began implementing the plan that had formed during her journey. The first visitors came within hours, women with sick children, asking quietly if she still had her special medicines. Word spread quickly that the medicine woman had returned, and with her, knowledge that could save lives. But it was young Timothy Fletcher who brought the news that changed everything. The boy, no more than 12, appeared at her door 3 weeks after her return, his face flushed with fever and excitement. "Miss Celestin," he gasped, "there's Indians coming. A whole party of them, heading this way." Through her window, she could see the dust cloud on the horizon. Her heart leaped as she recognized the lead rider, tall, proud, his long hair streaming behind him like a war banner. Nalnish had come for her. The town exploded into panic. Men grabbed rifles while women shepherded children indoors. But Celestin rolled her wheelchair onto her front porch and waited calmly as the Comanche party approached. There were 20 warriors, all in ceremonial dress, their faces painted for a formal occasion. They rode in perfect formation, stopping in the center of Main Street where every gun in town was aimed at them. Nalnish dismounted and walked toward her cabin, his steps measured and dignified. In his hands, he carried a beautifully decorated pipe and a folded document. "I come in peace," he called out in English, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent town. "I come to speak with the medicine woman about matters of treaty and trade." Josiah Brennan emerged from behind a water trough, his rifle shaking in his hands. "You savages ain't welcome here. Get on back where you came from." That's when Celestin's careful planning revealed itself. From her medical bag, she pulled out the document that Colonel Blackwood had signed, the treaty guaranteeing peaceful relations and safe passage for medical consultations. "Actually, Mr. Brennan," she said clearly, "they have every legal right to be here. This is official government business." As Nalnish approached her porch, she could see the hope and determination burning in his dark eyes. He knelt before her wheelchair, not in submission, but in the formal posture of one making an important request. "Celestin Hawthorne," he said, his voice carrying ancient ceremony, "I come to ask you to be my wife, to join your strength to mine, your healing to my protection, to build a bridge between two worlds that have forgotten how to see each other's worth." The proposal sent shockwaves through the watching crowd, but Celestin felt only a soaring joy that made her feel as if she could fly despite her useless legs. "And where would we live?" she asked, playing out the formality while her heart sang. "Wherever you choose. My people have accepted that love recognizes no boundaries. If you wish to stay among your own kind and heal them, I will build our lodge here. If you wish to return to the prairie, you will always be welcome. The choice is yours." Celestin looked around at the faces of Willowbrook citizens, some shocked, others disgusted, but a few showing the first glimmers of something that might become understanding. Then she looked at Nalnish, who offered her not pity or charity, but partnership between equals. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." The ceremony took place a month later, conducted by both the Comanche medicine man and Willowbrooks, Methodist preacher, in a rare display of cooperation. Ayanna served as her sister attendant, while tribal drums mixed with church hymns in an unlikely but beautiful harmony. They built their home on the border, between two worlds, a sturdy cabin, with a traditional garden where Celestin grew her healing herbs alongside Comanche sacred plants. She continued treating patients from both communities, while Nalnish served as translator and bridge builder, helping negotiate trade agreements that benefited everyone. Years later, when travelers asked how a paralyzed white woman and a Comanche warrior had managed to create peace where others had found only conflict, Celestin would smile and repeat the words that had started it all. He saw that broken things can still have power. "And I learned that strength comes in forms the world doesn't expect." Their love became legend across the frontier, proof that the human heart recognizes no boundaries, and that sometimes the greatest warriors are those who choose healing over harm, understanding over fear, and love over everything else the world insists should keep people apart.